بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة
الله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. Assalamu alayki ya Fatimatu Zahra. Inshallah everyone is doing well. Great to see everyone here. We are continuing our Saturday discussions. We're talking about the journey to the hereafter. We're going over Surah Al-Waqia because Surah Al-Waqia is one of the surahs that gives a very good depiction, detailed image of how life will be in the hereafter. And the verses that we're going over are verses 46 and 50 of Surah Al-Waqia. Wa alaykum as-salam. So if we see some, if you have a Quran by you or you can get one, go ahead and open it. And those that are here on Zoom, they are watching the presentation. We're going over verses 46 and 50. So we said that thinking of the hereafter is one of the important remembrances that a Muslim should have. A Muslim should not ever neglect the hereafter. And a person that recites Surah Al-Waqia, one of the benefits of that is that they will be recorded not as those that are ghafil, not as those that are neglectful of the hereafter, because it gives such a beautiful image of these three groups, the foremost, those with a good fortune and those with the ill fortune. And it talks about each one of them in detail, that a person that recites this, there's no way that at least when they're reciting or for a little bit afterwards, that they will be forgetting about the hereafter. Thinking about the hereafter causes us to remember the destination and to remember that this world is transient in nature and that we will not be here forever. This has been always one of the problems of mankind, is that we always think that this is our final abode and happiness and success or misery will only be in this world. But how the Imams mention to us that everything good will be in front of you and all evil will be in front of you, meaning that we have not seen good or evil yet, because this is a place of amal, it's a place of action. It is not a place of hisab or the account. So these are, especially in this day and age, in this time period, it's extremely important for us to remember, go over the Quran, which gives us life, it gives our hearts life again, and to remember the hereafter. The verses that we are going over are the verses for Ashabul Shimal, those of the left or those of ill fortune. Wa Ashabul Yameen ma Ashabul Yameen. At the end, I will say, or for As-Sabiqun As-Sabiqun, it mentioned that this is a jaza for them, for what they did. Jaza'an bima kanu ya'malun. This is a reward for whatever they did. For what they did, this is a reward. But interesting now, when you look at Ashab al-Shimal, those of the left, those that are going to, in reality, those that are of ill fortune, we see that it talks a bit about what they did, what causes them to fail. And Quran is warning us. Okay? So what is the first factor? So I'm going to explain this. I want you to think in your minds right now, why does Allah not mention the factors of success in detail, but mentions three factors of failure? I want you to think about that. He mentions the factors of failure in this surah, but he only just says jaza'an bima kanu ya'lamun. It's a reward for what they used to do. So the first, while we're explaining that, the first one, and we talked about this last time, is that, if you can see on the screen, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ مُتْرَفِينَ. So they had taraf. Taraf, you can say, means, according to some of the books of language, they're, muna'am, they were blessed. Mutrafin, it says affluence. And we talked a bit, remember last week we talked about this, that it doesn't mean necessarily you have to be really rich. Mutraf, according to, books, means that it is a person that has been blessed with something. Muna'am, that is blessed with something, and therefore they didn't use that blessing in the right way, right? Because they were blessed. When you're blessed, you have something, right? And you're supposed to use this, whatever it is that God blessed you with, in order for you to come closer to Allah. And when this doesn't happen, you get separated from Him. So the first reason that we talked about last week is إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ مُتْرَفِينَ. Some say that this part goes back to Nubuwwat, some of the Mufassiri, meaning that, indeed they were indulging in affluence, meaning that every group were sent a prophet. People of Mecca, people of Medina were sent a prophet. And those that went to the hellfire, they did not listen to the advice of the prophet. And they used to oppose him. And they fought against him. And they didn't believe in his message. One way to look at this, not only as affluence, as we said, these are all parts of it, that you have money and that money cause you to become intoxicated, that money caused you to forget about God, forget about religion. That's one aspect. But another aspect to think about is that you were giving a blessing, and what is the best blessing you can get? Rasulullah. What else can you get? What other blessing is there? Can anyone tell me that the people of Medina had? Besides Rasulullah, anyone? Those on Instagram too? What are one of the other blessings of Rasulullah? That Allah gave to Medina. Think about it. Allah gave the best of creation to Medina. Allah gave the best after Prophet Muhammad, Imam Ali. Very good. Sister says Ahlul Bayt. Allah gave Imam Ali, Sayyidah Fatima, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, 5 of the best together at one time. And for the city of Medina. And because this is the time of Fatimiyya, Allah gave the best lady ever created, in Medina. And what happens that this best lady that's ever created gets martyred at the age of 18, is Siddiqa, is Shahida, is martyred, is the truth teller, very truth telling, and is martyred, and then is buried in the middle of the night. What happens? That she mentions to Ali alayhi salam, Dafinni bil layl, qassilni bil layl, prepare me, qassilni bil layl, prepare me for death, bury me, wala tu'lam ahad, and don't tell anyone about, my burial. So would you consider, if you say mutrafin and taraf is a word that means blessing, that if you had the blessing of one city that Sayyidah Fatima was in, and you lived in that city, or Imam Ali alayhi salam lived in that city, and instead of going to their doors to seek knowledge, to seek guidance, you go to their doors, as Shia and Sunni sources say, with a fatila, with a torch, and they say, I will come to set your house on fire. And she comes to the door and says, in the books of history, Bilal Dhuri and Sa'ab al-Ashraf, are you going to set my house on fire? Are you going to set the door on fire? And he says, yes, I will. Or they admit later on that we broke open this house. So these are cases that when a person has a ni'mah, a blessing, they should make use of it. If you have, I'm a student, but if you live in a town and you have a scholar who's pious, knowledgeable, you have a blessing, use of that blessing. Go approach them, ask him, question him, or if it's an alima, if it's a sister, for example, for the sisters, ask your questions, get guidance from them, because they are, warithul anbiya or warathul anbiya. They understand, they inherit the truths, the statements of the prophets. The second part, so the first is getting a blessing and not taking advantage of that blessing, and not realizing what type of blessing that is, and not being grateful of that blessing. The second, and that some say, Ayatul Makarim gives the possibility that this is for nubuwwah, prophethood. And imamate is part of that, always. It's the continuation of the message of Rasulullah. وَكَانُوا يُصِرُّونَ عَلَى الْحِنْثِ الْعَظِيمِ is what we're doing today. So verse 46, Surah Al-Waqia. Verse 46 means that they used to persist in the great violation. There's this description of hell that we mentioned. It says why this happened to them. And later on we're going to see, Zaqum. They have from the tree of Zaqum, or the fruit of Zaqum. Zaqum is not a fruit, or tree, something in this world that some have, placed, some different cultures said this is Zaqum. It is a tree in hellfire, and we'll mention, some of the details of it. According to At-Tabrisi in Majmu' al-Bayan, Hinth, when we say وَكَانُوا يُصِرُّونَ, Yusirrun means to persist. Israr. Maybe you heard of Israr. Israr means to persist, to always, to keep doing it. So وَكَانُوا يُصِرُّونَ, when you have al-madi like this in kana, وَكَانُوا يُصِرُّونَ means they always did something. For example, when you have a hadith, sometimes you say قَالَ, he said, or it says, for example, kana yaqul, he used to say, he would repetitively say. So they would repetitively do, but then yusirrun, they would persist. So this is different. A sin that comes from this way is different than maybe Ashabul Yamin that would sin and ask for forgiveness and want repentance. Because if a person sins once, you don't say وَكَانُوا يُصِرُّونَ. You don't say they used to persist. Kanu yusirrun is this is their lifestyle. They're doing this every day. They don't care. They're just engulfed in sin. So we see here that, according to Tabrisi in Majmu' al-Bayan, Hinth means to violate one's solemn oath. Oath that, Hinth, so they used to break their oath. What oath do we have with Allah? The oath, according to Allama Tabatabai here, is an alamul dhar, that when Allah created us, He took an oath for us, and He asks us, am I not your Lord? And we says, Bala, or we said, we are, you are, yes, we accept. So the context of this verse suggests that when God says that they used to persist in the great sin, this means they arrogantly refuse to be servants of their Lord. Right? So Hinth is a promise. It can, suggest that it is a promise. And they broke this great violation. They broke this promise to be an abd of God. According to those that, understand that mithaq, the day of pledge, and the alam adhar, that all of us, even though we don't remember it necessarily, that all of us pledge that, Allah is our Rabb, Allah is our Lord. And when Allah is our Lord, we have to listen to Him. So this means that they used to persist in breaking this oath breakers. So that is one way to look at it. In spite of all this, they gave their obedience to other than God. They gave their obedience to idols. They gave their obedience to themselves, to the lower desires. And they kept sinning and sinning so much that they completely forgot about God's obedience, and they would only obey whatever their hearts desired. Some have said that Hinth always means a great sin. So hinth can be, one definition of hinth can be to violate one's oath. The other definition of hinth can be a great sin. And that the adjective azim is used here as a hyperbole, for example. And the great sin in this case is idolatry, shirk. Others have said that the great sin here is to denote the category of major sins. Maybe hinth and azim, they used to do the great sins, because if you do stay away from the great sins, and Allah will forgive you, inshallah, from your small sins. They swear by Allah with solemn oath that Allah will not resurrect those who die, for example. So the truth of the resurrection. Others have said that it refers to the oaths they swore to deny the truth of the resurrection, as alluded by the verse. So they had oaths, to deny the resurrection. They swear by Allah with solemn oath that Allah will not resurrect those who die. 1638. They swear their oaths that this will not happen. So maybe this hinthul azim. So we have 4 possibilities. One is they're just breaking the oath. One means that the other is shirk. The other is, major sins. And the fourth is that they had an oath amongst themselves that there will be no resurrection. But now there is resurrection, and they're in deep trouble. What is the difference from qalu, they said, wa kanu yaqulun, they used to say? Very good. From Instagram, they kept saying it. Very good. That's the difference. Again, in hadith, sometimes we have, good sayings from Ahl al-Bayt. For example, kana yaqul, the Imam used to say, meaning that there's a difference because he's always saying it. He's always advising, so we have to take more pay attention to it, because the Imam said it more oftenly, repetitively, said it often. Or when you just say it once, which is still important. But here, وَكَانُوا يَقُولُونَ, they used to say all the time, meaning that this is a firm belief that they have. They didn't just say it once and then they were like, okay, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. وَكَانُوا يَقُولُونَ, what they're about to say means this is ingrained in their hearts. أَإِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا وَعِظَامًا أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُوثُونَ. They used to say, when we die and become dust and bones, are we indeed to be resurrected? Here, how many times have you heard this argument from the deniers of hell and heaven and the hereafter, that they kept denying over and over? And this is again another proof that there is al-ma'ad al-jismani, meaning that it is a physical resurrection. Because if there's not a physical resurrection, what we mean by physical resurrection means it will be a bodily resurrection. We will have a body. We will be body, and we'll be able to be in some way feeling and seeing things. It will be different, but we will have that type of bodily existence, and it won't just be al-ma'ad, for example, rawhani, where it's just a spiritual thing. We will really have a physical body, because Quran keeps going over and over, talks about a physical and bodily description of the hereafter. And that's apparent, the dhuhur of the Quran. And I said this over and over. What about the, bodily rewards in heaven that we mentioned? For example, the different fruits, the different rivers. And then I come to the heaven after I get shafa'at from you, my students, inshallah. They say, or my study partner, and they say, this teacher or this person who led our discussions, allow him to go to heaven. And I go to heaven, I say, look, Allah, this is all spiritual. I don't want spiritual heaven. I wanted a physical heaven. I want a bodily heaven, just like I have because this is the description that I read in the Quran. Now the Billah could say this is false advertising. Because you advertise this, you said this, Allah. You said if you have taqwa, you'll get this. I want that, what you said in the Quran. So these again are proof that al-ma'ad will be al-jasmani, will be bodily resurrection. And that is the problem, because if al-ma'ad was rohani, and if the belief of the hereafter is only spiritual, it has nothing to do with the body coming back to life again, then there would be no questions in the Quran over and over and over again that how is this possible? Because the answer will be, okay, don't worry about it. The body will not come back to life. It's the spirit. It's just going to be a spiritual hereafter. So is this very clear for everyone? That it truly is ba'id, it truly is far-fetched to believe in al-ma'ad al-ruhani. After so many verses keep talking about one of the main reasons the polytheists denied the hereafter is because they believe that the body cannot be created again. Well then, if the body was not going to be created again in the first place, then what's the big deal about, their statements? وَكَانُوا يَقُولُونَ أَإِذَا مِتْنَا, you're going to give us death. وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا, and we become dust. وَعِظَامًا, and we're bones. Did anyone open up ever a graveyard or see a graveyard, a dead body after many years? It's just bones. After a time, even those bones decay. أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُوثُونَ, then we will be indeed resurrected. So this is for them hard to accept. Because the body, they see the bones, they see the graveyard. We're not the only ones that have the capability. They would look at it and they'll see bones and nothing. They say, wait a minute, you look at these bones, even the bones are decayed. God is going to create life from these bones, and there's going to be an afterlife. So this is a statement for those who deny the resurrection because they think it is improbable. Therefore, they emphasize their own denial of the resurrection by linking it to the resurrection of their forefathers that we're going to mention. So this is, al-mizan, because the resurrection of their forefathers seems to be even more unlikely to them. So they say, when we are bones, and then the next verse is this, أَوَ آبَاؤُنَا الْأَوَّلُونَ, what about our forefathers? Okay, we are going to be bones. But those that died many years ago, hundreds of years ago, they're just bones. They're nothing. You're going to give life to them again? Allah answers. Or actually here, can anyone tell me what qul means? Qul is the command form. It's to the Prophet. Qul, say, Rasulullah, answer them. So this shows you that this talk, how brother asked a very good question, is this real dialogue? Very good, say. Is this real dialogue? Yes, this really happened. There was a dialogue and they were saying this from the Zahir of the Quran, and now Allah is saying, answer them, Rasulullah. Qul innal awwaleen wal akhirin. Give them a solid answer that indeed the former and the later peoples, so it doesn't matter who you're saying now, or your grandparents, or your father's fathers, whoever, the former and the later, لَمَجْمُوعُونَ إِلَى مِيقَاتِ يَوْمٍ مَعْلُومٍ, are to be gathered together for the appointment of a known day, that everyone who lived life ever on earth, and true time separates our deaths. If you ever think of every soul ever created and every soul that ever died, it's more than the 6 billion, obviously, that we have presently. It's billions, of people that ever went through this test of creation on earth, no matter if they're 10,000 years ago, whenever they were, I don't know. All of them gathered, all humans, they died in different time periods, yes. But everyone will be raised together on the Day of Judgment. Everyone, there'll be billions and billions, and I don't know how the human population will, even those in the future, but there'll be billions of people, everyone together. It's going to be the biggest crowd ever, because you're talking about the population of earth, anyone that ever existed. And Allah says, tell them, Rasulullah, that all of them, doesn't matter how long ago they died, لَمَجْمُوعُونَ إِلَى مِيقَاتِ يَوْمٍ مَعْلُومٍ. So we have three things that we talked about that they caused them to go to hell. One, we're going back to the slides, mutrafin, they had a blessing and they did not take use of that blessing, they went to hellfire. Two, they did great sin. They broke their promise with God. They were not abds. They were not servants of Allah. they perform sins. The third is the denial, وَكَانُوا يَقُولُونَ. This is the third reason that why people go to hell is because they denied its beliefs. They denied the hereafter. So Ayatollah Makaram says, very interesting, he says, if you look at these three, possibly, Mutrafin goes back to the Prophet's time. They denied Rasalat because the best blessing is the Prophet. They denied the Prophet, Nabuwwah. 2, كانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم. They denied the rububiyyat of Allah. They say Allah exists, but they don't accept Him as a Lord. So they denied one of the parts of Tawheed, which is Tawheed and Rububiyyat, that the only legislative the only legislative power, you could say, which is Allah, the only legislative power that has the right to tell us what to do and what not to do is Allah. The third is denial of the hereafter, Ma'ad. So, Nabuwwat, Tawheed, and Ma'ad. Now this is something latif I want to say for you. Something, interesting point that another scholar that was going, on TV and talking about Surah Al-Waqia, and I was reading about what he said. He says, okay, look, you have 3 reasons why people go to hell. You really don't have a reason why they go to heaven or why they're sabiqun. It just says this is what they did. Can anyone tell me why the causes of going to hell are mentioned in this surah and the cause of going into heaven are not mentioned? It's an interesting question, right? From what we might just come to our mind, the dhuhur. So this scholar says this. When you look at people going to hell, it is true, is what they did. What caused them to go to hell is their actions. But is it the opposite truly? True, it says this is what they did. But one way is, did they really, people that go to heaven, is it necessarily because what they did or not? Do they deserve all that eternal reward? Because one of the biggest, punishments or descriptions of the hereafter is that it is eternal. It will last forever. So, for this amount of work that we do, and this quality of work that we do, and when you really, really dig into it, and you want to weigh our actions, that in reality, even our good deeds are bad deeds. This might be something tough to hear. That our good deeds are actually bad deeds. Because Imam Hussein alayhi salam mentions Dua Arafah, Ilahi, man kanat mahasinuhu masawi, fakayfa la takunu masawihi masawi. God, whoever's mahasin means husn, good. Whoever's good actions is actually bad. How are good actions really bad? Who can tell me? Because we're not performing it how it's supposed to really be performed. For example, let's just take salat. How much of our salat do we really pay attention to? Not a lot. From the beginning to the end. Do you right now have hudurul qalb? From the beginning to the end. And the narration mentions that 1/3 of salat goes up, a half of salat goes up, a fourth of salat, for example, goes up. And that is the part that you paid attention goes up. The rest doesn't go up, just stays. It's nothing. When you look at this, that those that enter heaven, it is from the fadl and grace of God. Those that go into hell is because the adalat and the justice of God. And because whoever enters heaven enters it through His grace, through His lutf. And this is a concept that many of us still don't understand. We think that we are actually doing something special. We think, what we are doing is very important. And therefore, in dua of Arafah, Imam Hussein says, Ilahi man kanat mahasinahu masawi. And whoever's good action is evil, is actually bad, because that salat that I perform is nothing but disrespect to Allah. I'm talking about my own salah. That salat that I come, I say Allahu Akbar, I'm doing a fast just to get it over with. Am I truly speaking to God? Am I truly speaking to him? No. No, do I really believe it is a meeting with me and Allah? So man kanat mahasinahu masawi fakayfa la takunu masawihi masawi. Then how can it be that his evil will not be evil, if my good is actually bad? When I take my salat and compare it to the salat of mizanul a'mal, which is the weight, the scale that they measure actions, and Ali ibn Abi Talib is mizanul a'mal. They compare my salat to the salat of Imam Ali. He said, this is salat. This is salat. What is this? What is this? This is Sawm of Ali. And this is, what is this? It's nothing. So you come to the conclusion that the only way to really go into heaven is from the fadl of Allah, is from the grace of Allah. So we never ask Allah to judge us by His justice. Because if you look up, Quran says, you have to have haqqu tuqat. You have to have the reality of taqwa. Do we have the reality of taqwa? And the traditions over and over says, don't rely on your actions. Rely on God's mercy. Rely on God's mercy. Rely on God's mercy. Because our actions are nothing. We just have hope that God will forgive us. We just hope that God will accept. And that is why all of us need intercession. Because it is never complete. Can anyone here really say that all their actions, everything they do, according to God, the Rabb, is complete? Complete worship, complete remembrance of Him? And when you look at the worship of the Prophet, look at the worship of Imam Ali, look at the worship of Lady Fatima, say that ours is nothing. So therefore, those three factors, because we really cause hell for ourselves. But for those that try, they attempt something, they did something, they tried, but it's still not complete because it's not at the A+ level. There needs to be God's forgiveness, there needs to be God's grace for them to reach that A+ level, which is what shafa'at is, intercession. May Allah inshallah make our actions be by the Quran. May Allah allow us to understand the Holy Quran. May Allah allow us to live our life and our family's life be based on the Quran. May Allah inshallah increase our love for Ahlul Bayt, our attachment for Ahlul Bayt, and we be the followers of Imam Mahdi. May Allah expedite his return with a salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farjuhum.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة